Hi, my name is Sarah Crooks, and I'm an ecofeminist artist, and I'll be presenting my project Home is Here for you today. The presentation is about an hour long, and I will go through the project and some of the process, as well as my lineage of ecofeminism, and hopefully help you during this time. So thank you for being here. First, I would like to acknowledge the Timucuan people of this land. They were the original caretakers and stewards, and we are on stolen land. And I would give thanks to them for being here for thousands of years and taking such good care. I would also like to acknowledge that I am a white woman and I have a certain lens of perspective and history of inheritance that may not be the same as everyone who's viewing this. And lastly, I would like to give gratitude to the community of life that supports my life, the plants and the animals that are my life support system. So thank you. Here we are in 2020, and it's supposed to be a time of clear vision, and yet we are in a place where our culture has never been and known it's been. So it's a really strange time, and COVID has brought a lot of inequity forward as well as a lot of resilience. So I am with you, and home is here. And we are all home. The title of my project, I had submitted a grant years ago, actually, and here we are with that as our reality. So we'll get through it, and artists are change makers. So I think that we are all going to learn so much about ourselves and how to build a community that's inclusive. I have been a practicing artist for more than 35 years, and my love is the environment, and my love is beauty, and I try to combine those two things, and I always have worked as an autobiographical artist as well, so my personal experience is a place for contemplation and inquiry and validating that as something as heroic as Tiepolo's paintings. So I studied botanical illustration when I was a guard at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. That was my day job, and I really needed to reconnect with nature. So this work is from that time, but it really sets a tone. I was schooled in the Renaissance, and I was taught to believe that man is supposed to be the dominant character in the world. And so here we have Michelangelo, and he of course was very famous, and this is David, who was supposed to be extracted from the marble itself. I've come to believe that that's a pretty egocentric way of being, and our time is not of the Renaissance. It certainly has a place in history, but at this time we are evolving. My background as a draftsperson and artist brought me to seeking more of a feminine perspective, and one of the characters in that was Kiki Smith, who's still very vibrant today. Sue Coe, who did a lot of political action work with her charcoal drawings around the commercial farming operations with the pork industry. And then this woman, Ana Mendieta, she was a Cuban artist who emigrated here and was always trying to reconnect to the natural world. And I just wanted to put her forward. She died in 1985. Fell from 34 flights up, and who knows if she was pushed. but her work is very relevant, and she used her body a lot, and she celebrated the feminine form, as well as this idea of being part of nature, not dominating nature like the Michelangelo. The Guerrilla Girls were a big part of my schooling too, my self-schooling. They brought to the forefront the inequities in the art world, and if you don't know them, please look them up. I also think art making is a philosophy. It's a way of viewing the world and thinking about the world, and I take that very seriously as a contemplative practice. I consider what I do a spiritual practice as well. And Joanna Macy, who's a Buddhist psychologist, really informed a lot of my workshop and community work. And art critic Susie Gablick, I'm covering up her name under there, excuse me, but she was writing in the 90s, and she really promoted process as a valid form of making art, and encouraged artists to make art for life rather than for the market. So I do lots of different things, and let's get moving. So I'm not a great movie maker, but I'm moving. So this is a little clip from something I've been working on that will give you some background.
Oh, it doesn't know what to do with the color. It's kind of interesting.
If you want, you can also kind of bring it up a little bit, and so you get the full thing.
You want to be in the picture.
It's kind of like that.
Yes, of course you do. This is Emma churning away.
This is what I'm churning.
I'm an eco-feminist artist, and I work with recycled material.
So that was a little bit about Red Pearl River. So Red Pearl River is my mythological place that I have been creating for the last 10 years. And it really, the fabric that you saw becomes 16-foot tapestry drawings that represent stages in human development as well as ecosystems of the river. I am a trained Florida master naturalist, so a lot of what I do is blend that environmental science with symbolism and mythology and personal experience. So I live at the mouth of the St. Johns River in Northeast Florida. And Northeast Florida is a really pretty special place for a lot of reasons. Florida is overall, but this landscape is where the Europeans first arrived in the 1500s, and this river is one of their primary locations for penetrating the continent of North America. So the St. Johns River was named a National Heritage River in 1998, And then in 2008, it was ranked number 6 as an endangered river. So my work tries to repattern our ways of living in and responding to and connecting with the environment. So this is an early engraving by Theodore de Bry and Jacques Lemoyne. They kind of had this partnership that's hard to explain right now, but it's the first propaganda of the New World, and it was created during the exploration by the French. And we are fortunate to have them, a whole set of the original engravings at our main library downtown. So I grew up with this information as part of my history and as something like that David to look up to. Part of what I do is walk to the river. I live close enough where I can go every morning, and when I found this deer washed ashore after one of the hurricanes, I immediately thought of that de Bry print, the stag. And the Timucuan people are encircling the stag, who is stuffed with flowers, and it looks to me like a celebration of spring and of veneration for the natural world. And what's really interesting is the contrast between the Timucuan people and the French explorers, just in how hard and soft their gestures are, as well as their outfits. So a lot of what I think about is vulnerability and resistance, and then what we hold precious and what we discard. So this piece, Gifts from the River, I collected trash from walks for about 2 months and then assembled this at Yellow House earlier this year. It really sets the tone for Red Pearl River, because red is really about redirecting my energy daily and looking for ways that I can change my mindset from being a consumer to a creative, or from being living with depression to expression. And daily practice of art making has always been a really good part of that, as well as connecting to nature. So in 2009, I started on this series, and I stood Marys that had fallen in a field. And I also wanted to repattern the inheritance of colonialism. So I created silk screens, and this was one of them. And you'll see by the end, it really became a significant part of the chains of being. So that fabric, on the left you see the undyed part, and then on the right a dyed part. And as the video showed, I go through a process of letting go. So I draw on fabric and I repattern the fabric, and I can't go backwards because it's a very raw, real record of my movements, making marks. And then I reach a point where it feels like it might be ready to let go. And I put the 16-foot piece of fabric in a dye bath and then deal with what comes out on the other side. So each 16-foot drawing starts with 2 seed images, and the rest evolves from my imagination. So like this drunken rabbit and the Ku Klux Klansman underneath the drunken rabbit just appeared in my studio one day. And so I have then to go into a conversation with those ideas in myself and in my work. The other person that appeared was this little girl, and she's in the woods on the other side from the healers. So here's the dye bath again. It goes through a rinse process, and then it gets hung out on the line. So the first one is called Healers Arrive on the banks of Red Pearl River. And when I stood up those Marys, I drew them, and they were floating, and I needed them to be grounded. So I added a line, and when I added that line, that Mary became the river. And when I said to a friend, oh yeah, I'm this Mary thing, you know, I'm not really Catholic, but I took on the Mother of God. And my friend said, oh, she became the river? Then that's Yamaya. And so Yamaya is a goddess of the waters who was brought actually to Florida with the terrible slave trade, and she is still here. So I am thankful for being exposed to that tradition, and here is a little route of her circumnavigating the globe, really. I mean, people that practice this are all over the world. So when I added that line and she became the river, I started on a journey I had never anticipated, and this is where it went. The next one, I started with a seed image of an Incan man in his homemade reed boat and his alpaca and his royalty, really. I mean, I just felt like he was so in tune with his environment and in command of himself in this river. So I wanted to venerate that. And the drawing started with that. And I wanted to make him a river. So I drew this huge line and it turned into a water spirit. I couldn't have planned it better because look at the little upturned umbrella that was that chinoiserie motif. So the water spirit came. And the water spirit really is about our connection to animals and the earth and how we look at the earth, and how our culture teaches us. My culture that I inherited was a Judeo-Christian culture dominated by a white male god, and snakes were evil. And when I go back into ancient cultures before Christianity, I find that, yes, indeed, the serpent was a representative of nature, ever renewing and transformative. So I started that conversation between myself and my inheritance, and put this into public spaces as part of what I do. During the water spirit, Beasts of Burden is the official title of that. Kuan Yin appeared above two cranes, and she's the goddess of compassion. So as the goddess of compassion, that process of letting go has really tied me to processes in my own personal life of needing to let go of things that no longer serve me. The serpent, or water spirit, is encircling a young girl who is tending to a tree. So that tree of life became my next couple of years of focus. The series started in 2009, as I said, and to get to this point, I had already helped my ex-husband now, but go through a cancer journey, and homeschooled my daughter, and made art. So I was working on this work a couple of hours a day, maybe sometimes just 1 hour a day. And each tapestry drawing is sewn to a backing once it's completed. And it's like framing it, but it's also a meditation and mindfulness and tenacity and just caretaking for my work in the world. So there's a story that's older than dirt, as some people would say, but nothing's really older than dirt, right? And it's about Tiamat. And Tiamat, it was the Babylonian goddess of nature and fertility, and she was represented as this giant water spirit. In this battle, Marduk comes and slays Tiamat and cuts her body into small pieces and throws her body all across the heavens and across the world, and she then becomes the mountains and the moon and all the different parts of nature. But in that act of slaying her, he dismembered her, and Marduk went on to then become the king who built the Tower of Babel, which I find really interesting, which obviously was the predecessor for Roman and Greek times and then Christianity. So the idea of nature being slain and dismembered is still with us, of course, now in this time of extraction and climate change and crisis. So my job as an artist, I feel, is to put that back together, to restore it in a way of belonging and wholeness. A big part of that is to reawaken wonder, and I think wonder is one of our greatest resources that we really don't give enough value to as a culture. But wonder in beauty, and wonder in transformation, and wonder in just how we're all still breathing, is something that I think is worth pursuing. So Red Pearl River as a whole is a mythopoetic world based on the principles of unconditional love. And this is the storyteller bird. And as an educator and an artist that likes to work in public spaces and community places, I think the eyes of the child is our most critical audience, really. I think to give them hope and to give them a source of inspiration and really honor and respect their abilities. And so a lot of my work is teaching. And on the left, that was a guerrilla performance, a pop-up performance in Silver Glen Springs that was family-oriented. And then the lower right is an interactive oyster bed. Oysters are the keystone species of the estuary, which is the mouth of the St. Johns River. So I am also a community artist that writes grants and makes a living in part because of those contributions. And a water spirit rises. So the beasts of burden, the big serpents, inspired me to make a giant puppet. And woven in community workshops out of hundreds of water bottles, here it is performed in Hemingway. So the eyes of a child, the water spirit's a rainbow. And part of what I do also is journal. And when I was writing that grant, I was like, I don't know what to make the water spirit so it can come alive. And the answer was a rainbow. And so weaving all this discarded plastic together, I upscaled a braiding technique called kumihimo, which is a jewelry technique for beading. And this photograph was taken by John Moran, who's a champion of the Springs. And it really is about redirecting our energy, Red, to be creative rather than consumptive. And it's not about recycling at this point for me, but it's about getting under that paradigm and shifting it. So I have a little dinosaur because actually all those plastics are just an offshoot of oil refinery. Here's the water spirit head. My daughter was the puppeteer that operated the head, and I was the wood stork, and these children were just delighted. So when I took on the Tree of Life, I didn't have any more chinoiserie fabric. I actually had fabric that reminded me of my sheets when I was a little girl, and they had all these little seedlings, and I said, okay, I'm going to take on the Tree of Life and draw it and live it and be it, and what came out was a surprise. So on the left is those little seedlings and drawing in charcoal, and you can see that labyrinth is starting to disintegrate. And then on the right is the the bearer of the gift, who's really a crone figure, and she's down below the tree when you see it, and the big one, you'll see her, and that's the finished product. The video I showed you earlier is actually the dyeing of the gift, and always when I dye it, it's so vibrant and wonderful, and then the color changes. So I was dyeing it red, and I'll change to kind of a pink, and this one's very festive. It feels like Bollywood to me. But the seed image was, and you can see here, was my mother and my daughter, and here's the giver down here, and things like this. This is the goddess of the gift. She just appeared one day in my studio in the work. So I asked the work, what does it need, and things arise, and then I have to accommodate that. Other parts is to actually just look at a specimen. I've got honeysuckle here, and then repatterning that underlying pattern with my own silk screens. Here's the big finished work, and the gift is 16 feet long. And I actually asked other women to help me sew it from the Unitarian Universalist Church. That was a big deal for me to invite other women in, but it was part of my growing towards accepting myself. So here we are. I grew up here in Jacksonville, and when I was a kid, this was woods. Before COVID, before the Amazon was burning, before Australia last year, they announced that 60% of biodiversity is gone. And it's gone since the 70s, which is my lifetime. And I've always been an environmentalist. I have never really been anything else. But I used to try and change the world. Now I know I have to change myself, and those little micro movements are what matter. So I was invited to be the artist in residence at the Museum of Science and History, and luckily twice in a row. And 2016 they gave me free rein to explore their taxidermy collection, to look at articles of ownership, and look at how we revere or not water. Was my quest, because I had done the Healers Arrive at the Mouth, I had finished Beasts of Burden, I had finished The Gift, which was the watershed, and I was looking for another power animal, having done oysters and water spirit and the wood stork, and I thought I was making a manatee, but instead I fell in love with a Florida black bear. So this is a drawing from one of the taxidermied mounts, and it's life-size, and it's a really pissed off, excuse my language, bear on top of a house. And the biggest loss of biodiversity is a direct result of habitat loss, and that habitat loss is a direct result of human habitat gain, or not. So I also do little installations and kind of these miniature things from discarded objects. This is a little house referencing the story of the three bears. And I have incorporated images of murals that I painted in people's homes, very beautiful, exquisite homes. And I'm thankful for those commissions. But here it's kind of an irony of who's going to sit in that chair. And I don't know if you grew up on Goldilocks, but I did, and it's kind of an interesting parallel to imperialism. The bear turned into a big bear, who you saw a preview of Grandmother Star Bear in the video before, and I recycled a quilt that was a family heirloom quilt that I had inherited and made into this cloak that I wear in performance. And Grandmother Star Bear, the story goes that she was friends with Chief Micanopy. So 7 generations back in the life of Florida black bear, she would have been counseling him, actually, because there was a real reverence for bears as healers and guides. So with this work, I started to understand that indigenous culture a little bit deeper, and am thankful for that. And in that system, which is the original Earth-based system, and almost every Earth-based system has something which would be similar. This idea that we are all related, that we are all kin. We are kin with the mouse people, we are kin with the tree people, we are kin with the bear people, and we are all stewards of this great earth and participants in this great earth, and humans are really the little brothers because they haven't been on the planet as long as things like oysters, millions of years old. So Grandmother Star Bear is that quintessential other, really, of the natural world to me. When I put on Grandmother Star Bear, I become something that might be taken as old and scary and raggedy and even look like I'm homeless, because really bears are kind of homeless. I mean, we're having a lot more interactions with bears and humans because bears are smart enough to be lazy. They come and they eat our trash that we throw out, so many good things that an omnivore would eat. So, you know, they're smart. They're going to get calories from dog food or bird seed, or, you know, even your McDonald's half-eaten burger in the car. So, but put that aside, the bear is a very ancient symbol of a powerful matriarchal figure. But she also reminds us how important it is to go inward. So the Florida black bear doesn't hibernate per se, but it does den, and during that time things slow down, and it's a really intuitive time for the bear to be dreaming and conserving energy and nursing its young for part of that time before the young are able to go out in the spring. So that's where we are now. We're in this time. Home is here. We have had to retreat. And bear gives me a lot of strength in thinking about that, and really introspective. So the bear is the keeper of the watershed, and she's also the keeper of the springs. So in 2016, in March, I spread this fabric across my wall during a week that was called the Long March to Rome, and it coincided with the anniversary of Columbus coming to America, and indigenous people from all over the world went and literally had an audience with the Pope to ask him to rescind the papal bulls. So the papal bulls are those original doctrines of discovery that gave Christians the right to, permission from the church to go and Catholicize the rest of the world and claim it for their God. And believe it or not, those are still considered legal documents. So in my fabric, I have 3 little bulls here, and I also have a descent, so going to this underground place. My seed image was a piece of cotton. And years ago, I wanted to take on cotton, and living in the South, cotton is supercharged with racism and slavery and white supremacy. But I didn't think I was qualified. In 2016, I felt like I was able to take that on. My marriage was dissolving. My husband had been returned to health from his cancer. My daughter was growing up, and I was basically kind of feeling like I had been mentally enslaved by this patriarchal system. And so I took on cotton, and the cotton then became my own way of really dissolving, to some degree, this colonized mind that I had inherited. So here's that little girl, and she is under the water, and she is doing just fine. And the chains of her enslavement are breaking. So Red Pearl River took me 10 years. It has certainly been a journey of self-discovery. It has certainly been a journey of aligning myself with the natural world. When I took the bear as my confidant, I learned that the bear is a symbol of the West. And the work of the West is to do what we can before we die and go and descend in, and move through this life that we know. So the descent was certainly a foreshadowing for me of the time that I'm living in now. I think as humans we go through many descents, and each time we learn something new. And I learned the story of Ayana and Ereshkigal. And Ayana and Ereshkigal are two sisters, who are twin sisters. And this is a Babylonian story, again, before Marduk comes. And so in Ayana and Ereshkigal, one is the keeper of the light and the other is the keeper of the dark, and one lives above ground and the other lives below ground, and they're twins. And Ereshkigal lives in the underworld, and she sends word to her sister to come because she's in great distress. Her husband has died. And Ereshkigal says, come. And so Ayana goes, and in that process of descent, she has to give away so much. She gives away her crown, she gives away her pearls, she gives away her world. And the last thing that she has to give away when she gets down there is her own skin. And the skin falls away, and she meets her sister in that naked, vulnerable place of just being her bones. And her sister's writhing in dry labor. Her sister's been trying to bring ideas forward, been trying to be creative, been trying to give life to new life. And she's dry. And luckily the companion of Ayana knows something's wrong and had been asked to come after 3 days. And she comes and she brings water. And the water is what restores the world. So water is our sacred place, is our sacred beginning. Meditative practice holds me in place. The meditative practice of letting go, when I die the work, of sowing the work, of doing the work, holds me in place. Here is the tie-dyes I did before dyeing the backing fabric. So my question is red. How do you redirect your energy daily? We're in code red. We are in code red, literally. And COVID. So I've started thinking of Covida. How do we work this with life instead of against life? And I believe we're at a time of great turning. Joanna Macy is one of the teachers that expresses that so well. And the turning is an opportunity to reconnect to the world and reconnect to community as a larger part of our whole, not as a dominant culture that's out to conquer and extract. And for me, that story is told through water, because we need a new story where everyone has access to clean water. Water is the navigator, it is the conduit of our emotions, and it is also our original home. So how can we practice reciprocity with the living world? How can I, as an artist, how can I, as a woman, as a mother, as an explorer, practice reciprocity? And part of that is the materials I choose. So I intentionally choose these materials as something that is not extractive. I've taken them and held them in the stream of things instead of demanding I go out and buy something new. And so I'm cutting up. My recent work is actually digesting those images of the Renaissance and cutting them up like gabion into something new. So here's my water shrine. Red Pearl River is a practice, which means it's ongoing. It's a process, not a product. I got a grant. That's partly how I'm here. And I got a grant through the state, and part of that grant is to do a series of blessings and workshops and raise consciousness about our St. John's River. So the first river blessing was on winter solstice at the mouth, and the picture on the left is a photograph of the mouth up at Huguenot Park. And then I did a sand drawing workshop with participants as well as a water blessing. I'll be taking the waters that I collect as well as the blessings down to the source of the St. John's River, which is in Fellsmere, and I think my video is right on top of the source. 310 miles to the south of the mouth, taking those blessings and be giving them back in an action of reciprocity in my kayak in June. So anyone is welcome to join me. Hopefully we won't be under the restrictions then. But along the way, I have gone to Ocala National Forest and done installations in Silver Springs Park. And Silver Springs is to the left of the little purple bear, and the little purple bear in my hand-drawn map is sitting in Ocala. So during the time of making this presentation, I found out that the Ocklawaha River, which is the tributary to the St. John's, is now on the endangered rivers list. And that is primarily because of the dam, the Rodman Dam. And the Rodman Dam is not a functional dam and doesn't give us any kind of hydroelectric power or anything like that. It was part of the Cross Florida Barge Canal that never worked, but it effectively stops up the flow of a river that's more than 100 miles long and creates stagnant water. And in that stagnant heavy water, the springs that feed that river are blocked. And all it really does is provide a few people a nice fishing spot. So the Rodman Dam needs to come down. Sounds of Home. Sounds of Home is here. Part of my grant was to do workshops in the fall called Birth Stories and Beyond, where I met with whoever wanted to show up, really. I went to Westminster Woods retirement home and worked with an elderly population there, and I also did some workshops at the public libraries. And we talked about our original relationship with our mothers and our birth stories, and then we remade those birth stories into something that was nurturing if it hadn't been nurturing, as well as something that was more inclusive of the river and the world, the natural world. So as part of changing that cosmology of patriarchal dominance that I inherited, I'm restoring that now with people, and this is a song from that.
River runs around and through all of us. It nurtures us, gives us strength, and from there we are all connected. The river runs around and through all of us. It nurtures us, gives us strength, and from there we are all connected.
Push on through, push on through, push on through with.
I hope you can listen to that a little bit longer. It layers multiple voices and ambient sounds that I collected on walks along the river. This picture was taken at an exhibition at the library, and it was in front of Descent, and it was a student of mine who happened to be going through the library with her daughters and her daughters' daughters, and it was so much fun to see them all together. And I feel like my work as an artist is really to help bring the stories of the feminine forward. It's very needed at this time. So community is one of the things that we have to nurture. So how have I created a sustainable studio practice? It's ever changing, honestly. I do have some bread and butter things now, but the essential questions are: who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? And most importantly, why do you make art? And setting up short and long-term goals for yourself. Red Pearl River happened over 10 years. I can't tell you how many grants I have written trying to get funding, and finally did get substantial funding in this matching grant. So I'm still seeking some of the match with what I do with workshops and things. But I have certainly been well supported as an artist throughout my career with grant making. So those short and long-term goals, 10 years is not a long time. Define your bottom line cost of freedom. What does freedom mean to you? Can you afford to work and put money in the bank so you can do your other work? I live very simply. I don't travel. I don't choose to travel a lot on airplanes. I don't go out to Ruth Chris and things like that. But those are choices, and you have to make your own choices. Evolving healthy relationships starts with self-care. I thought for the most part of my life, taking care meant taking care of everybody around me. Well, it doesn't. It means taking care of yourself first. And certainly at this time of COVID, we are seeing the need for that. And then the other question is scarcity or abundance. Where do we come from? we come from, or I come from, a lineage that teaches scarcity. Capitalism is based on scarcity because we have to always be getting something to make us feel whole. Being immersed in the natural world has always been such a source of abundance to me that I don't need to buy anything to get there. So think about your life in terms of 7 generations forward and back, 7 generations of women and men and animals and planet brought you here. And so how can you be good stewards for that going forward? I am trained as a Florida Masters naturalist, and part of what I do is I take a lot of walks. I used to be an oil painter and did paintings about those things I would find on walks. I'm allergic to oils now, so I don't do that. I do red instead. But that mural painting has informed my work. I like to work really large. I'm also a printmaker and have work in healthcare settings, in corporate settings, in individual clients' homes. So that's certainly something to find is your niche if you are an object maker. I make a lot less objects now for that kind of consumption because I like to do public work and experiential work. But just last year I sold a piece to hospice that I had made literally 20 years ago. That was a beautiful composite painting, 10 feet long, of flowers. So this is a home. These people have collected my work for 25 years, and when they redid their home, I was so honored because they actually created spaces specifically to hang my work. Recently, I have started making textile works that are digitally printed. So butterflies are one of my processes that I do. I've made thousands of butterflies and installations with butterflies. And now I'm making personal accoutrements. I'm making scarves. The other thing that has, or process, or deep love that I have is for teaching, and especially for children. And I have been a grant writer doing after-school art programs with inner-city kids, and since the 90s I've worked with homeless men and women in New York City, and most recently been honored to be an arts integration specialist with the Duval County Public Schools, and I subcontract with Cathedral Arts. So I go in and I integrate art and environmental science technically with the curriculum, but my real focus is to give the children a way to resource with the natural world that gives them a sense of safety and makes them feel grounded and helps them love it. So here is a little art interpretation of one of my commissioned artworks that's down in Ponte Vedra in a restaurant. And so I could use that with the kids, and I loved seeing what they had to say about it and hearing their stories of hope because of the nature of the work. I've also been privileged to work as a team builder using art. This is a team of engineers from Lode King, and they were expanding their department and wanted to make sure that the new guys were integrated, and also wanted to give them some fun and do them a service by teaching them how to draw from life. So that was my job. I got to design a 12-week curriculum for these guys, and we had a blast. Here's Flock of Wonder installed at the MD Anderson facility downtown, and that was another project where I had community involvement, and it was a real an experience of gratitude on my part to be able to work with cancer patients and work with their caregivers and the medical community and create this memorial really to our transformation as people and resilience. So each butterfly is hand silk screened onto an ephemeral substrate, which in this case was related to cancer journeys, and then I go through a process to make them more stable and mount them to the wall. So I've been working on this project to make this presentation a lot. So I've been, that's been my art this week and last week. But on my walk to the river, I found this dead turtle. I had been hit by a car. And I came home and I was really disturbed by it. And I chose to make a sign. I used acrylic paint. I used wood that I had. I went back and I put the sign in the curve where the turtle had been hit. And I picked up the turtle and I put the turtle in the woods where it could be consumed by animals, and those animals wouldn't be hit by being in the road. So as a naturalist and an artist, I'm not grossed out by much. But my question is, is that art? Is that art making? Caring for the world? Is that art making? I used art materials. I had a process. I had an intention. I had a connection, and my focus was beauty. And so I'll leave you with that. So how can we make art? How do we make art? What is art? I'm back. So one of the gifts of Red Pearl River was to find a woman named Tara Brach, who is a Buddhist psychologist, and she does meditations online and lectures, and she has this process called RAIN, and recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. And it has come in so handy for me as a mother, as an artist, as a person who really doesn't know. I don't know if I'm going to get COVID. I don't know now if the world is going to be the same as it was. It's not going to be the same as it was. And so how can I practice that self-compassion when fear comes up? And this practice of RAIN is a way of turning inward and doing a check-in where I recognize I'm in fear. I recognize I'm scared, or I recognize that my heart's beating really fast. And instead of fighting that, I allow it. Because when we fight it, we hold it. When we allow it, then we can become curious and investigate. Where in my body am I holding this tension? Where in my body am I holding the fear? And it goes both ways. It doesn't have to be a sort of a scary kind of thing, but it goes both ways. And then once I key into that with my body, not with my mind, how do I nurture that so that I can bring myself back into the present, and bring myself back into a place of love? So I throw that out there as a sustainable studio practice. Here are two views of water. So water, one, we walk on the pipes all day long. It's invisible. It's there when we need it. We take it for granted. We dirty it up. It goes away. And the other view is, how do we practice reverence for water? How would we practice something that looked like we cared about water? So this was installed as the Springs House at Yellow House. Some of you may have seen that. And for me, water is really the first of two great loves, right? We breathe oxygen, which is a singular element. But water, we couldn't live without water either, is like this first relationship. It's the love between hydrogen and oxygen. They stay in a connection. They could connect to other things, but they stay in this connection to each other, two hydrogens clinging to one oxygen. And then they attract each other. So this water, this chain of water, becomes this great chain of belonging. So water, as essential, takes our emotions with it, cleans us. and it is essentially an aspect of the divine feminine. Women and water have always been on the same line. So the divine feminine, people are afraid of that, and they think, oh, I'm going to lose my place in the world. But no, it's not about that at all. It's about balancing this masculine power. And so we all have masculine and feminine aspects in our personalities and in our psyche and in our culture. But our Western culture has really put forward and valued the masculine side. The logical, straight line thinking, dominant control, the pitcher versus the catcher and the outfielder. And so the divine feminine is rising to balance that. One of the things Tara Brach says too is that it's the survival of the nurtured. It's not the survival of the fittest. And as we move forward as a community that is now globally connected in so many obvious ways, we need to evolve empathy. That's going to be our biggest strategy going forward, is how do we evolve empathy with ourselves, with each other, with the natural world. And artists are called to sing that naturally. We do that. We transform materials with spirit into something that resonates. And I couldn't think of a better job to be doing. So I have written a book about Home is Here, which is available on my website. I would love to connect with you. If you want to email me, you can contact me through the website. And I hope this has helped you. I hope you understand my project a little bit better. And if you'd like to get involved, of course, you can do that too. So just contact me. Collaborations are essential. This is the latest iteration of my butterflies. I got to collaborate with the Greenway of the East Coast. So they're building a non-motorized trail for people on their bicycles or walking. The Greenway extends from Maine to Key West. And I got to be the artist in residence. So I created a collaborative workshop with them, as well as an online experience, as well as the artwork that they used to brand their summit. That was supposed to happen in Jacksonville, but because of COVID, it went online. But collaborations are essential. So build those relationships. I am thankful for the support of the state of Florida and the Division of Cultural Affairs, the Community Foundation, the Art Ventures Fund, Community First, Cultural Council, and Yellow House, as well as UNF, for supporting my Home is Here project. Thank you.